Right.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Bridget Bohan and I'm a sports performance coach here at Marquette University for the fall semester of 2017. And today I will be presenting my annual plan for rock climbing. So first of all, rock climbing was just added as a sport for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And it will have 3 different events. So can anybody name any of the 3 types of rock climbing that there are?
Bouldering.
Yeah.
Speed climbing.
There's one more.
Lead.
Yep. So lead, bouldering, and speed rock climbing. So they're a little different. So lead rock climbing, the athlete will start at the bottom of the route and they'll climb as high as they can in a certain amount of time, and that's how they'll be scored. So as you can see, the route has different elevations and different holds, which is what you call like the rocks. So what they're going to be pulling themselves up on, and then they'll be in a harness, and as they climb up, they'll attach the harness to different quick holds. So bouldering's a little similar in that it has different elevations of the wall, but the holds are a little more irregular in shape, and they actually call their routes, they call them puzzles because it involves a lot more strategy, and they're just trying to get to the top of the puzzle and complete the puzzle. So they have a few more attempts than lead, which only has 1 attempt. And then for speed rock climbing, which is what I'll be focusing on today, it's a lot more basic. It has a flat wall and it has holds in the exact same place for each wall. So I'll get into that a little bit more. So for speed rock climbing, they'll start at the bottom of the route and they'll climb to the top as fast as they can, and they'll just be scored based on their time. So they'll be, as you can see here, they'll start at the bottom and the light will go off to signal their start, and then they'll just hit a button at the top to stop their time. So here, this video is actually the world record holder for men's, and this is his climb of 5.48 seconds, and they actually call him the Persian cheetah, just because he can climb up the wall so fast. He kind of looks like an animal. It's pretty crazy. So the women's world record time is 7.46 seconds. So rock climbing became popular, or speed rock climbing started to become more popular in 2007 when the International Federation for Sport Climbing made a certified wall, which is 15 meters in height, and as I said before, has holds in the exact same spot. So you can see these walls are exactly the same as this wall. So this made a more uniform, so we can compare the times for different athletes. So that's when it became popular as a sport, so we could compare. But before, it was just used recreationally. But it's gaining more popularity in the U.S., but it's more popular out of the country at this time. But I think once it appears in the Olympics, it'll gain a lot more popularity in the U.S. So for the biomechanics needs analysis of a speed rock climber, so we're mainly going to focus on speed, obviously, because that is how you win the sport. So since most climbers will complete their route in under 15 seconds, it's going to be solely anaerobic energy source. And then we also are going to focus on strength. It is mainly a lower body dominant sport because they need to propel themselves up through their lower body, so that's very important to focus on strength, and then as well as mobility and balance. So as I said, it's lower body dominant, so we're going to focus on training the triple extensors, and we're going to mainly focus on doing this unilaterally because it is very rare for them to be moving in the same plane of motion through their legs at the same time. This is just not how the sport works, as you can see here in these pictures. It's just not how it is. And then, so even though I said it is mainly lower body dominant, we are going to focus on upper body because they need to be able, there's going to be times when their legs are not in contact with the wall, so they have to have the ability to pull their body up with their arms as well. So we're going to mainly focus on the back muscles and shoulder girdle as well. So core muscles are very important because they need to be able to have the ability to stabilize their body because they are moving at such high speeds. So that is something to consider, and it also helps to keep them in balance as well. And then another point that's very important for their technique is to keep their center of mass as close to the wall as they possibly can. This just makes it more efficient, so when they have the body close to the wall, they can more efficiently or more effectively push through their triple extensors and climb up the wall at faster speeds. And then finally, just grip strength. So we're not going to focus as much in training since this is going to come naturally with climbing because it's so repetitive, but it is something to focus on because if they don't have the grip strength to pull themselves up the wall, they're going to slip off and their opponent's going to beat them. So they do handle this with chalk and different rock climbing shoes that have grip on the bottom, so that's one way to handle it. So for the injury analysis, we're going to see that mainly the injuries for speed rock climbers are going to be overuse injuries since it is such a repetitive sport and at such high speeds, but there also are going to be some imbalances or injury due to imbalances and weaknesses and just muscle tightness as well. So first of all, we'll see some grip inflammation. So what they call in this picture, they call that a crimping hold. So doing this so repetitively will cause inflammation in their grip, and after a while will cause injury. So that is something to consider as well, because they need to have enough rest between their climbing so that this does not occur. So a lot of rock climbers will complain of chronic hip and shoulder pain generally due to immobility in these joints. So that's something to consider, to make sure they have mobility in these joints, because they need to be as close to the wall, as I said, as possible. So having a lot of mobility in these joints would really help avoid injury there. And then, so we do have impact. So it's a little bit different than a boulder climber would have, because they have impact of falling. But a speed rock climber will be in a harness, so they don't have the impact of falling. But they will have impact against the wall. So there's times when the rock climber will not be in contact with the wall at all. So when they come back in contact, since they are moving at such high speeds, they can result in some injury from that. So that's something to think about. And then as well, just poor biomechanics in climbing techniques. So for example, raising your shoulder or rounding your back or moving your elbow out will put more stress on muscle groups that do not have the ability to handle these loads. So just keeping good climbing technique is a way to avoid injury then. So for my annual plan, I decided to do a collegiate rock climber. This is a little bit different than a national rock climber would be, because they are going to be having competitions all in the U.S., whereas a non-collegiate athlete will be out of the country, traveling a lot more often. So for a collegiate athlete, I had to consider a lot more breaks and final schedules when the athlete's not going to be as focused on their training as they normally would. And I also decided to do strength testing at the beginning of each season, as well as vertical jump testing at the beginning of each week, just as an indicator of their progress in their training. So what I did was 25 weeks of off-season, 6 weeks of preseason, and 15 weeks of in-season, all leading up to the regional championship. So for the off-season, I just really wanted to focus on building foundational strength with foundational lifts, just working on imbalances that they have in their muscle groups. And I will be doing this at higher intensities with lower reps. And they'll be training 4 days a week, since they won't be climbing on the wall as often, and they won't be traveling for competitions at all. So they can really work on building their strength. So just a sample workout, I just have really foundational lifts, pretty basic, total body, since that's how the sport works. And I decided to do 3 weeks of loading and then 1 week of not, just to make sure that we are not overloading the athlete, since it is very common for overuse injuries. So for preseason, I'm moving into more sport-specific motions, so a lot more unilateral strength and explosive movement, since it is very dominant in speed, obviously. So we'll be training with higher reps at lower intensities, and they'll be training 3 days a week, because at this time they'll be starting to climb more on the wall, getting ready for their in-season more so. So we want to make sure that they're not being overloaded. So for my sample workout, I have more unilateral, as I said, and then I have different variations in upper body, so it's different pull-up variations with different grip or different widths of the bar to work on their grip strength. As you can see in this picture, there's another way to do that. I also added some plyometric and speed training just to work on their explosive movements, as well as adding hip and shoulder mobility. So for the in-season, it's going to be very, very similar to the preseason. I'm going to focus mainly on maintaining the strength and speed that they've built up all this time. So I just want to make sure that they're at their peak performance for their regional championship and for each competition. So I also added a 2-week taper leading to this regional championship to make sure that they're have enough rest and can really be at their best performance for that. So it's going to be lower volume, but at the same intensity as their preseason, just to make sure that they aren't being overused at all. So I have, for my sample workouts, I have pretty much the same thing as my preseason, just working on sport-specific motions, just really maintaining everything and making sure they are ready for competition. So that's all I have, but here's my contact information if you have any questions, or if you have any questions now, I'll be happy to answer.
All right, questions? Same deal. Hand up.
Okay, so you talked a lot about like grip inflammation. So how are you going to account for that? Like when people have to hold like heavy dumbbells and heavy barbells.
Well, so you can do it in so they could not be doing as much grip work. They can lift in other ways. So I think that would be a way to do it, just like avoiding gripping, I guess, if they have that inflammation, just to make sure that they're not being overused.
During your preseason, you had 4 sets of 8 on there as a comment. Is that consistent with every exercise, or would that vary? Because I noticed you had hang cleans, and 8 reps of hang cleans is a lot.
Yeah, so I think it just would like depend. Yeah, so I don't think that they should be doing that as much. That's a good point. I think maybe it would vary amongst different things, because obviously, yeah, that's a good point.
You said the main energy system is going to be a creatine phosphate system. Have you ever considered supplementing your athletes, provided it's within the regulations for it?
I did not look into that at all, but that's a good question. But I'd have to get back to you on that.
In the event itself, obviously, the vast majority of the movements are like concentric based, like you mentioned, triple extension,
Yeah.
pulling.
Yeah.
So like concentric dominant.
Yeah.
How, what thoughts did that spark for you when you were kind of looking to train these athletes? Did you consider eccentric work, and do you think it would make sense to have eccentric work in there for these athletes, or would you focus more so on those kind of concentric movements? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a good thought. I think they should do some eccentric, but I think it would make sense to focus mainly on concentric, as you said. But that is something to consider. Yes.
Any other questions? No? All right, good job.